Commander Vorith stepped off his shuttle and looked around the trading station with disgust on his face. Meridian 7 was a neutral zone, where species from across the galaxy came to trade and make deals. But to Vorith, it was nothing more than a garbage heap floating in space. He was Kylosi, a member of the greatest empire in the known universe. And he did not like being in places where lesser species walked freely, as if they were his equals. His two enforcers walked behind him, their heavy boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. These were not ordinary soldiers, but elite warriors trained from birth to kill without hesitation. Each one stood over 7 feet tall, with thick gray skin and forearms that could tear a man apart in seconds. Vorith trusted them completely. Today he had come to this station for one reason only. He needed to find a scientist named Lysa Tavern. She was a Villani, one of those thin and delicate blue-skinned creatures who were known throughout the galaxy for their brilliant minds. The Villani had no military and no real power, but their knowledge of genetics and biology was unmatched. Lysa, in particular, had made discoveries that could change the balance of power between empires. Vorith wanted those discoveries for himself. His spies had told him exactly where to find her. She spent most of her evenings in the biome gardens on the upper level of the station, a place filled with plants and trees from 100 different worlds. It was peaceful there, and Lysa liked peace. That was about to change. Vorith walked through the station without looking at anyone. The other species moved out of his way quickly because everyone knew what the Kylosi were capable of. Some of them were afraid, and some of them were simply smart enough to avoid trouble. Either way, Vorith enjoyed watching them scatter. When he reached the biodome, he found it nearly empty. The artificial sun was setting through the glass ceiling, casting orange and pink light across the flowers and fountains. It would have been beautiful if Vorith cared about such things. He did not. He spotted Lysa sitting alone on a bench near a small waterfall. She was exactly as his spies had described, thin and graceful with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Her white hair was pulled back from her face, and she wore simple clothes that suggested she cared nothing for status or wealth. She was reading something on a tablet and did not look up as Vorith approached. This annoyed him. Did she not know who he was? He stopped in front of her and waited for her to acknowledge him. She continued reading. One of his enforcers growled low in his throat, but Vorith held up a hand to silence him. He would handle this himself. Lysa Tavern, he said, making her name sound like an accusation. She looked up slowly and studied his face with those large dark eyes. There was no fear in them, which surprised him. Most people showed fear when they saw a Kylosi commander. Yes, she said calmly. I am Commander Vorith of the Kylosi Imperial Fleet, and I have come to make you an offer. She set down her tablet and folded her hands in her lap. I am listening. Vorith smiled because he enjoyed this part. He enjoyed watching people realize they had no choice but to obey him. Your research in genetic modification has caught the attention of my empire, he said, and we believe your talents are being wasted here on this pathetic station. I see. The Kylosi Empire is prepared to offer you unlimited resources, the finest laboratories in the galaxy, and a team of assistants who will follow your every command. Lysa tilted her head slightly. And if I refuse this generous offer? Vorith let his smile grow wider. The Villani have no military, he said slowly, and no protectors, and you are very far from home right now. And I have 200 soldiers on my ship who would be happy to escort you there, whether you agree or not. There it was, the threat hanging in the air between them like a blade ready to fall. This was usually the moment when people broke. They would cry or beg or try to bargain, and Vorith would enjoy every second of their desperation before taking what he wanted anyway. But Lysa did not cry. She did not beg. Instead, she smiled. It was a small smile, almost gentle, and it confused Vorith completely. I appreciate the offer, Commander, she said in that same calm voice. But I should mention that my husband will be joining me for dinner shortly. And perhaps you would like to discuss this with him? Vorith blinked her husband. He had read her file carefully and knew that she was married. But he had not considered this important. The Villani males were even weaker than the females. Scholars and artists who had never held a weapon in their lives. What could a Villani husband possibly do against the might of the Kalosi Empire? Vorith laughed. It was a loud and cruel laugh that echoed through the biodome. His enforcers joined in because they knew what was expected of them. By all means, Vorith said when he finished laughing. Let him come, and I will explain to him that his wife now belongs to the Kalosi Empire. Lysa's smile did not fade. If anything, it grew. Slightly wider. I think you might be surprised, she said. Vorith did not understand what she meant, and he did not care. He was Commander Vorith of the Kalosi Imperial Fleet. He had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions and broken the spirits of creatures far more dangerous than one Villani. Scientist and her pathetic husband nothing in this galaxy could surprise him anymore. He was absolutely certain of this. He gestured for his enforcers to take positions on either side of the bench. They would wait for this husband to arrive. They would show him exactly how powerless he was, and then they would take Lysa, Tara, him back to the ship, whether she liked it or not. The artificial sun continued to set through the glass ceiling. The waterfall made soft, peaceful sounds behind them, and somewhere on the station, footsteps were approaching the biodome. Footsteps that would change everything. The doors of the biodome slid open with a soft hiss. Vorith turned to look, expecting to see another thin and fragile Villani walking through. What he saw instead made him pause. A human walked in. He was not particularly tall by galactic standards, perhaps 6 feet in height, which was shorter than most Kalosi warriors. He had dark hair cut short, and a face that was neither handsome nor ugly, but somewhere in between. He wore simple civilian clothes, a gray jacket over a black shirt. Nothing that suggested wealth or status. At first glance, he seemed completely ordinary. But Vorith had spent 30 years in the military, and he knew how to read people. He knew how to spot danger even when it tried to hide itself, and something about this human made every instinct in his body suddenly wake up. It was the way the human moved. There was no wasted motion in his steps, no nervous energy or hesitation. Each movement was precise and controlled, like a predator walking through its territory. His eyes swept across the biodome once, taking in everything in less than 2 seconds. Vorith saw those eyes pause briefly on his enforcers, measuring them, calculating angles and distances, and then the human smiled and walked toward the bench where Lysa was sitting. Hey, sweetheart, he said, bending down to kiss her forehead. Sorry, I am late. Lysa reached up and touched his face with obvious affection. You are right on time, actually, she said. We have guests. The human straightened and looked at Vorith as if noticing him for the first time. Evening, he said pleasantly. I am Marcus, and you must be the gentleman who wanted to talk business with my wife. Vorith felt his jaw tighten. This was not what he had expected at all. He had heard about humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard about them by now. They were a young species from a small blue planet on the edge of nowhere, and they had only been part of galactic society for about 200 years. Most species considered them unremarkable. They were warm-blooded and short-lived, and had no special abilities worth mentioning. They were decent traders and acceptable engineers, but nothing special. Certainly nothing that should concern a Kalosi commander, and yet something about this particular human made Vorith uncomfortable. He pushed the feeling aside because he Refuse to show weakness in front of anyone. Your wife has been offered a great honor, Boris said, keeping his voice steady. The Kalosi Empire wishes to employ her talents in our research division. Marcus nodded slowly, as if considering this. And what did she say? She has not yet given her final answer. Marcus looked at Lysa. What do you think, honey? Lysa shook her head. I think I would prefer to continue my work here. Marcus turned back to Varth and shrugged. There you go, he said. She's not interested. But thank you for the offer. Varth felt anger building in his chest. This human was dismissing him as if he were some minor official asking for a permit. Did he not understand who he was talking to? I do not believe you understand the situation, Varth said coldly. This is not a request. Sounds like a threat. Take it however you like. Marcus was quiet for a moment. His pleasant expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. It was subtle. Barely noticeable, but Varth saw it, the warmth in those eyes disappeared and was replaced by something else. Something cold and calculating. And utterly without mercy, Varth had seen that look. Before he had seen it in the eyes of soldiers who had killed so many times that death meant nothing to them anymore. Let me tell you a little about myself, Marcus said in that same pleasant voice. I served in the United Earth Marine Corps for 12 years, and I did 3 combat tours in the Periphery Wars. He paused and glanced at the enforcers again. I have killed 37 enemies in close combat, he continued, and I have lost count of how many I killed from a distance. And I walked away from all of it because I found something better. He reached down and took Lysa's hand in his own. I found her, he said simply, and she is my entire world now. And I will do anything to keep her safe. Varth forced himself to laugh, even though something in his gut was telling him to be careful. You are one human, he said, and I have 2 elite warriors standing right here, and 200 more on my ship, and you think you can threaten me? Marcus smiled again, but it was not a friendly smile anymore. I am not threatening you. Commander, he said quietly, I am making you a promise. He let go of Lysa's hand and stepped forward. The enforcers tensed, but Marcus ignored them completely. He stopped less than an arm's length from Varth and looked directly into his eyes. Walk away, Marcus said. Apologize to my wife for wasting her time and walk away. And we can all forget this happened. Varth stared at the human in disbelief. No one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever dared. He should have been furious. He should have ordered his enforcers to tear this arrogant creature apart, right then and there, but something stopped him, something in the way Marcus was standing. Told Varth that this human was not bluffing. This human had done exactly what he claimed and probably much more. This human was genuinely dangerous for one brief moment. Varth considered taking the offer. He considered apologizing and walking away and finding another scientist to abduct, but his pride would not allow it. He was Kylosi. He did not retreat from humans. Take him. Varth commanded his enforcers move forward, and everything changed. The first enforcer lunged at Marcus with all 4 arms reaching out to grab him. He was fast for a creature of his size, and his claws could tear through metal without much effort under normal circumstances. He would have had Marcus in his grip within a heartbeat, but Marcus was not there anymore. He had moved at the exact moment the enforcer committed to the attack, stepping sideways, just enough to let those 4 arms grab nothing but empty air. Then Marcus grabbed one of those arms and twisted it in a direction it was not meant to go. There was a loud cracking sound, and the enforcer screamed in pain. Marcus used the enforcer's own momentum against him, pulling and spinning and slamming the massive creature face first into the metal bench where Lysa had been sitting. She had already moved out of the way because she knew what was coming. The second enforcer was smarter than the first. He did not tried to grab Marcus, but instead pulled out a plasma knife that glowed bright blue in the evening light. He swung it in a wide arc, aimed at taking off the human's head. Marcus ducked under the swing and stepped inside the enforcer's guard. His hand shot up and grabbed the enforcer's arm at a very specific point near the elbow. He squeezed. The enforcer's eyes went wide with shock as his entire arm went numb. The plasma knife fell from his fingers and clattered on the ground. Marcus did not stop moving. His heel came down hard on the enforcer's knee, and there was another cracking sound followed by another scream. Then his palm struck the enforcer's throat with just enough force to collapse his windpipe without killing him. The second enforcer fell to the ground, clutching his throat and trying to breathe through his damaged airway. He would survive, but he would not be fighting anyone for a long time. The entire exchange had taken less than 4 seconds. Vorith stared at the scene in front of him and could not believe what he was seeing. His elite warriors, 2 of the most dangerous soldiers in the Colossi military, were lying on the ground writhing in pain. A single human had defeated them both without breaking a sweat. It was impossible, and yet it had happened right in front of his eyes. Vorith reached for his sidearm. It was a plasma pistol capable of burning a hole through solid steel, and he had killed dozens of enemies with it over the years. His hand never made it to the holster. Marcus was suddenly there, right in front of him, so close that Vorith could feel the heat of his breath. One of the human's hands clamped down on Vorith's wrist and pinned it to the holster. The other hand wrapped around Vorith's throat and began to squeeze, not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to make breathing very difficult. "You should have walked away," Marcus said quietly. His voice was calm and controlled, with no anger or excitement in it at all. He might as well have been discussing the weather. This terrified Vorith more than anything else. A man who could do violence like this without any emotion was far more dangerous than one who acted in rage. "Let me tell you something about humans," Marcus continued. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, and we are not the fastest or the smartest or the most advanced." He increased the pressure on Vorith's throat slightly. "But we have something that most species do not understand," he said. "We bond with things, and I do not mean just other humans." His eyes were completely cold now, like frozen steel. "We bond with our friends and our pets and our ships and our homes," Marcus said. "And when we bond with something, it becomes ours. And we protect what is ours with everything we have." He glanced over at Lysa, who was watching from a safe distance with no fear in her eyes. "I found her 7 years ago," Marcus said, "and she saw something in me that I did not know was there. And she helped me become someone better than I was." He turned back to Vorith. "She is my wife," he said. "She is my family, and she is the reason I stopped being a weapon and started being a person again." The grip on Vorith's throat tightened just a little more. "So understand this very clearly, Commander," Marcus whispered. "There is no fleet large enough to stop me, and there is no army strong enough to protect you, and there is no distance far enough to hide you if you ever threaten her again." He pulled Vorith closer so their faces were only inches apart. "I spent 6 years fighting in wars that would give you nightmares," Marcus said, "and I learned things about killing that your soldiers cannot even imagine. And I walked away from all of it because I wanted peace." His eyes bore into Vorith's soul. "But if you take away my peace," he said, "I will become something worse than any nightmare you have ever had. And I will hunt you across the galaxy, and I will find you no matter where you run. And I will make you regret every choice that led you to this moment." He released Vorith suddenly, and the commander stumbled backward, gasping for air. His throat burned and his wrist ached, and his pride was shattered beyond repair. "Now," Marcus said in that same calm voice, "I believe you owe my wife an apology." Vorith looked at the human standing in front of him. He looked at his enforcers still groaning on the ground. He looked at Lysa watching with that same small smile on her face. And for the first time in his entire life, Commander Vorith of the Colossi Imperial Fleet felt genuine fear. "I apologize," he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Marcus nodded. "Good," he said. "Now take your men and leave, and do not come back." Vareth did not argue. He helped his enforcers to their feet and half carried them toward the biodome doors. He did not look back. He could not bear to see the human watching him retreat. When the doors closed behind him, Marcus let out a long, slow breath. The coldness in his eyes faded away and was replaced by warmth again. He turned to Lysa and smiled. "Sorry about that," he said. "I hope I did not scare you." Lysa walked over and wrapped her arms around him. "You could never scare me," she said softly. "You are my protector." Marcus held her close and kissed the top of her head. "Always," he promised. News traveled fast on Meridian 7. By the time Vareth reached his ship, half the station already knew what had happened in the biodome gardens. By the next morning, everyone knew. The story spread from merchant to merchant and from dock worker to dock worker until it reached every corner of the station. A Kalasi commander had tried to take a Volani scientist by force. Her human husband had stopped him. 2 elite Kalosi enforcers had been defeated in seconds. The commander himself had been forced to apologize and retreat. Some people did not believe it at first because it sounded too incredible to be true. But there were witnesses who had seen Vareth stumbling out of the biodome with his wounded soldiers. There were security recordings that showed parts of what happened inside. The evidence was undeniable. A single human had faced down the might of the Kalosi Empire and won. At first, the story was just entertainment for the residents of Meridian 7. They laughed about it in the bars and trading halls and wondered what the Kalosi would do next. But as the days passed, something strange began to happen. People started paying attention to the humans on the station in a way they never had before. There were not many humans on Meridian 7. Perhaps a few hundred out of a population of 30,000. They worked as traders and engineers, and doctors and security consultants. Most of them were unremarkable by galactic standards, living quiet lives and causing no trouble. But now the other species looked at them differently. They noticed things they had not noticed before. They noticed the human woman who worked in the medical bay. Her name was Sarah, and she was married to a Rithani mathematician, a timid creature with 6 eyes and a nervous disposition. Sarah was small and soft-spoken and seemed completely harmless. But one day, a drunk Tarvasi merchant started harassing her husband, mocking him for being weak and pathetic and married to a human of all things. Sarah stepped between them without hesitation. She did not raise her voice or make any threats. She simply looked at the merchant with eyes that were suddenly very hard and said that if he touched her husband, she would make him regret it for the rest of his very short life. The merchant was twice her size and had claws that could cut through bone. He backed away without saying another word. People noticed the human man who ran a small cargo operation on the lower decks. His name was James, and his wife was an elderly Silith archivist who moved slowly and needed help with many daily tasks. James took care of her with patience and tenderness that surprised everyone who saw it. He helped her eat and helped her walk, and read to her every night before bed. When someone asked him why he had married someone so old and frail, he looked at them with confusion, as if the question made no sense at all. "Because I love her," he said simply, "and she needs me." People noticed the human children playing with alien playmates in the station parks. They were fierce, little creatures who protected their friends with a loyalty that seemed far too intense for their age. When a group of older children tried to bully a young Villani boy, 3 human children no older than 8 years stood in front of him and refused to move. They were small and outnumbered, but there was something in their eyes that made the bullies hesitate. One of the human children, a girl with red hair and freckles, told the bullies that if they touched her friend, she would bite them so hard they would need stitches. The bullies decided to find easier targets all across the station. People began to see patterns they had missed before. Humans did not just form relationships, They formed bonds deep, unbreakable bonds that went far beyond anything most species experienced when a human loved you. You became part of their pack. You became family, and humans protected their family with a ferocity that bordered on madness. A Rithani philosopher wrote an essay about this phenomenon and shared it on the station network. He called it the human paradox, and it quickly became the most discussed piece of writing on Meridian 7. In it, he argued that humans were simultaneously the gentlest and the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They could show incredible kindness and compassion to complete strangers. They adopted orphans and rescued injured animals and volunteered their time to help those in need. But cross one of their loved ones, and they became something else entirely. They became protectors and avengers and relentless hunters who would never stop until justice was served. The philosopher concluded that the safest place in the galaxy was behind a human who loved you, and the most dangerous place was between a human and someone they were protecting. This idea spread beyond Meridian 7 as traders and travelers carried the story to other stations and other worlds. The tale of Marcus Cole and his Vellani wife became famous throughout the sector. Some people told it as a warning, and some told it as an inspiration, but everyone who heard it understood the same basic truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. Meanwhile, in their small apartment on Meridian 7, Marcus and Lisa lived their quiet life. Marcus worked as a security consultant during the day and came home to cook dinner every evening. He had learned to make several Vellani dishes that Lisa loved, and he was slowly teaching her to appreciate human cuisine. They talked about her research and his work, and the small, ordinary things that filled their days. Sometimes, late at night, Lisa would wake up and find Marcus standing by the window staring out at the stars. She knew he was remembering the wars and the violence and all the terrible things he had done before they met. She would walk up behind him and wrap her arms around his waist and hold him until the memories faded. "I am here," she would whisper. "You are safe now." And Marcus would turn and hold her close and thank whatever gods might be listening that he had found her. He had been a weapon once, a tool of destruction with no purpose beyond killing. She had given him something better. She had given him love and peace and a reason to live. He would never let anyone take that away. 3 months after the incident in the biodome, Commander Vorth sat alone in his quarters on the Kalosi homeworld. He had not been the same since returning from Meridian 7. His superiors had heard about his humiliation, and his reputation had suffered greatly. Some of his rivals openly mocked him for being defeated by a single human. Others simply avoided him as if failure might be contagious. But Vorth was not thinking about his reputation. Right now, he was thinking about what he had learned. He had spent the last 3 months gathering information about humans from every source he could find. He had read their history and studied their wars and analyzed their behavior patterns, and the more he learned, the more disturbed he became. Humans were not supposed to be dangerous. They were a young species with primitive technology and short lifespans. They had no natural weapons, no claws or fangs or venom. Their senses were mediocre, and their physical strength was unremarkable. By every standard measure, they should have been easy prey for more advanced civilizations. But they were not. Somehow this unremarkable species had not only survived first contact with the galaxy, but had thrived. They had fought wars against enemies far more powerful than themselves, and won. They had established colonies across dozens of worlds. They had earned the respect of ancient civilizations that had dismissed them as irrelevant. How had they done it? Vorth finally understood the answer. It was not their technology or their tactics or their numbers. It was something far more fundamental. Humans form bonds. They bonded with each other and with other species and with places and ideas and causes. And when they bonded with something, they became unreasonably committed to protecting it. Other species formed attachments, of course, but those attachments were rational and measured, and could be broken under enough pressure. Human attachments were different. Human attachments did not push a human hard enough, and they did not retreat or surrender or give up. They dug in deeper. They became more determined. They became more dangerous. A human with nothing to protect was manageable. A human protecting something they loved was a force of nature that could not be stopped. Vorith thought about Marcus Cole standing in front of him in the biodome. He remembered the cold look in those eyes and the absolute certainty in that voice. Marcus had not been bluffing when he made his threat. If Vorith had harmed Lysa, Marcus would have hunted him across the galaxy. He would have dedicated his entire life to revenge. Nothing would have stopped him. Not distance. Not armies, not the full might of the Colossi Empire. That kind of dedication was terrifying. Vorith began writing his report. He titled it Strategic Assessment, Human Integration in Galactic Society, and marked it as classified at the highest level. The key passage took him hours to write because he wanted to get it exactly right. We have fundamentally misunderstood the human species, he wrote, and our previous assessments of their threat level were dangerously inaccurate. Their physical capabilities, while notable, are secondary to a far more concerning trait. He continued, they possess a psychological bonding mechanism that transcends species barriers and rational self-interest. When a human forms an attachment, whether romantic or familial or social, they become irrationally and strategically and often violently committed to protecting that bond. This commitment does not fade over time and does not diminish under pressure and cannot be negotiated away. Our models did not account for this variable, and our projections were therefore flawed. He paused and thought about what to recommend. The obvious answer was to avoid humans entirely, but that was not practical since humans were now too integrated into galactic society to be isolated. They were everywhere now, trading and working and forming bonds with species across the galaxy. Every world with humans had people who were now part of human families, human friendships, human communities. Those people had become protected by the strange, fierce loyalty that humans showed to their own. Attacking them meant attacking humans, and attacking humans was far more costly than anyone had previously calculated. Vorith finished his report with a simple recommendation. Do not threaten what humans love. He wrote, do not give them reasons to fight, and avoid entanglement at all costs. He submitted the report and leaned back in his chair. He would never admit it to anyone, but part of him was glad he had failed on Meridian 7. If he had succeeded in taking Lysa, Marcus would have come for him, and Vorith was certain he would not have survived that encounter. Sometimes losing was the best possible outcome far away on Meridian 7. Life continued as it always had. Marcus and Lysa enjoyed a quiet breakfast in their apartment while the artificial sun rose through the station windows. She was telling him about a breakthrough in her research, and he was listening with genuine interest, even though he did not understand most of the technical details. He loved watching her face light up when she talked about her work. He loved the way she gestured with her hands when she got excited. He loved everything about her. After breakfast, she left for her laboratory, and Marcus went to meet a client about a security contract. The station hummed with activity around them. Thousands of beings going about their daily lives. It was ordinary and peaceful, and exactly what Marcus had always wanted. On the other side of the station, a young Vellani diplomat named Kira stood nervously in a corridor. She had been working up the courage to do this for weeks now. There was a human engineer named David who worked in the power systems division. She had met him at a conference 6 months ago, and they had talked for hours about everything and nothing. She had felt something she could not quite explain, a connection that went beyond professional interest. She had heard the stories about Marcus and Lysa. She had read the philosopher's essay about human bonds. She had talked to other species who had fallen in love with humans, and they all said the same thing. Being loved by a human was like nothing else in the galaxy. You became the center of their world. You became their family. You became someone they would fight for and die for and live for. Kira took a deep breath and walked toward the Power Systems Division. She found David working on a console with his back to her. He was not particularly handsome by human standards. Average height, with brown hair and kind eyes. But when he turned and saw her, his whole face lit up with a smile. "Kira," he said with obvious pleasure. "I was hoping I would see you today." She smiled back. "I was hoping the same thing," she said. "Do you have time for a cup of coffee?" David closed his console without hesitation. "For you?" he said. "Always." They walked together toward the station cafe, and somewhere in the vast machinery of galactic politics, the balance of power shifted just a little bit more, one small love story at a time.